course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. It's 1 year from the evil murders and riots in Southport, so tonight we will assess whether the Labour government has learned its lesson in being straight with the public if it wants to avoid a summer of discontent. I'll be joined by the Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Tice, to reveal the untold billions of savings for the taxpayer that are easy to find if only the Bank of England ostriches get their act together. Meanwhile, the Online Safety Act has sent ruptures across the political establishment as a Labour minister shamefully and outrageously accuses GB News' Nigel Farage of being on the side of Jimmy Savile. Plus, I will also be breaking my silence on the advert that has caused a storm, with many suggesting the reference to good genes amounts to white supremacy. State of the Nation starts now. And I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author, Michael Crick. As always, I want to know your views. You know where to send them, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Bowen.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The headlines at 1 minute past 8. US President Donald Trump has said this evening that he did not discuss the UK's plan to recognise a Palestinian state with Sir Keir Starmer. That's as the Prime Minister announced this afternoon that the country plans to recognise Palestine unless the Israeli government takes steps to end the, quote, appalling situation in Gaza. Sir Keir Starmer said he would lay the plans before the United Nations General Assembly in September. Israel's Foreign Ministry has said tonight that the proposal is a reward for Hamas and harms efforts towards a ceasefire. Speaking in Downing Street, the Prime Minister said that the UK will recognise Palestine unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end this appalling situation in Gaza, reaches a ceasefire, makes clear there will be no annexation of the West Bank, and commits to a long-term peace process that delivers a two-state solution. He added that the UK is supporting efforts for a ceasefire. Also tonight, US President Donald Trump has said that the UK could reduce energy costs by 70% if they used North Sea oil. The President has now left Scotland after he officially opened a new 18-hole golf course near Balmedy. Speaking to reporters this evening on Air Force One, the President said that he spoke with the Prime Minister on the use of windmills, encouraging Sir Keir Starmer to get rid of them. He also said that he'd had no response from Russia on tariffs. The President's comments on energy come as he earlier hit out at British taxes, saying they are so high it makes no sense. He added that North Sea oil is a treasure chest for the UK. Nigel Farage has called the Online Safety Act one of the most dangerous pieces of legislation he's seen amid a deepening row over online free speech. Earlier, senior Labour Cabinet Minister Peter Kyle accused the Reform UK leader of being on the side of paedophiles like Jimmy Savile as he defended the law that requires social media sites and search engines to prevent children accessing harmful content like pornography. Nigel Farage said that Mr Kyle's comments were below the belt. And a 3-minute silence has taken place today to mark 1 year since the Southport stabbing attack. B.B. King, Elsie Stancombe and Alice Da Silva Aguiar were murdered by Axel Rudder-Cabana at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport on the 29th of July last year. He attempted to murder 8 others. Earlier, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said that the nation stood with the families of the 3 victims. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Today marks 1 year since the Southport attack, the brutal mass stabbing that killed 3 young girls and injured 10 others at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class and changed a community forever. Instantly and instinctively, the British public knew there was something unusual about this attack. They knew they weren't being told the full story. It took 3 days to name the suspect, whom we were initially told was a Welsh choir boy. Then took until October, 3 months later, until the additional charges, including possession of a terror manual and possession of a biological weapon, were revealed to the public. In the protests and eventual riots that followed, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, decided to crack down firmly on them. People such as Lucy Conley were put in prison for years for things they said online. Offenders were rushed through the judicial system, while rapists remain untried. By the end of it, society's trust in the government had collapsed. There is no doubt that the tragedy was handled badly. The question for us today is, has Sir Keir Starmer learned from his mistakes? The lesson above all is that leaving an information vacuum will be filled by something else. It will be filled by speculation, by people making things up, by conspiracy theories. And in order to maintain trust in our institutions, the institutions themselves must trust the British public, who are capable of understanding and processing complex information. When the Prime Ministers and others hide behind sub judice laws to withhold the additional charges and keep things secret, this effectively sends a message to the public that they are not to be trusted with the truth. Anyone watching television over the past few weeks will be able to tell you that. As one of my viewers wrote last night on the Mail Moggs, the atmosphere is thick with a seething tension that spells trouble for the summer. Last week, for example, concerns were raised surrounding the use of the 4-star Britannia Hotel for migrants in Canary Wharf. Initially, the Home Office tried to suggest that this was nonsense, but that turned out not to be true. So not just not giving us any information, sometimes giving misleading information, and the public has had enough of being misled. As the head of the Police Federation has said, the police are simply not ready for a summer of discontent. We cannot have another Southport, and if the Prime Minister wants to avoid one, he needs to be honest with the British public. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. I'm now joined by the man who warned about the importance of being honest with the public at the time, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall KC. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining me. How do you think a similar event should be dealt with the difficulty of the sub judice rules and the fact that Radhika Banu was under 18? Does the law need to be changed to allow more information to be given out?
Yes, it does. It does. I think that the rule about not naming someone who is under 18 was a hard break. I mean, it took the good sense of a judge actually to say he needs to be named. This is ridiculous. But I mean, that is a hard reason which stops the truth coming out. That probably needs to be looked at. I think the contempt of court also needs to be looked at as well. I mean, and I know this from the inside. It is the police and the prosecutors with this case that they're so worried about. If you imagine it was one of the worst crimes that's been committed on this soil, they're being told by lawyers, we think there may be a risk of prejudice, and they become ultra cautious. And they don't think about the bigger picture. And I don't think that the Contempt of Court Act, it goes back to 1981, was, I mean, it's an obvious point to make. It was not written with social media in mind. So the law does need to be changed. I mean, I think that there is some evidence that the police have been a bit better. So there were 2 instances, I mean, you probably know them. One is an easy one, which is the man who ran down various people on Water Street in Liverpool. They came out and they said that he was a white 53-year-old man or whatever, fine. The other one, which I think was a sign that they are improving, is the arrests of various people who are now being charged. They're Iranians, charged under the National Security Act. And the government, the police said that they were irregular entrants. And I think that does show a sort of creeping realization that when people want to know something, they obviously want to know something for a reason, and you shouldn't not tell the people what they want to know unless there's a very good reason. I think they're learning, but ultimately the law will need to adapt, I think.
And how high a bar are the sub judice rules for getting to the point where a trial is deemed to be unfair. Is it as low a bar as perhaps the police legal advisors and indeed the media's legal advisors may have been suggesting to them? Because I just wonder whether there's some self-censorship as well amongst the media outlets who worry unduly about the sub judice laws.
I think there is self-censorship. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of media people, and they're very worried about being taken to court. The problem is that the law, the case law on this, is quite vague and difficult to apply. And so people to take what you might call a precautionary approach. Who knows, frankly, whether something that I say 6 months, a year, 18 months for a trial is going to lead to any prejudice at all. And it's so unknowable. I think sometimes people err far too much on the side of caution. So I can see why the media do it. They're really, really worried. They don't have huge budgets. Their lawyers are desperately trying to avoid the editors going to court. So I think this is why the lead's got to be taken by the police, actually. I mean, actually more than the government. In operational matters, I think you want the independent or operation independent police to say, you know, obviously some people will never believe us, but we are the police. We can tell you what we've seen and put that into the public domain, give a lead, and then the media can follow.
Yes, I'm sure you're right about that, but there was a feeling last year that this was all very convenient for the government and that the government actually wanted this restriction of information and was encouraging the police to give out as little as possible.
No, I didn't detect that. I mean, I've as you can imagine, I've sort of shaken around behind the system to try and work that out. My clear impression was this was massive overcaution by the CPS, actually.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for your very clear views and thank you for joining me on the programme. With me now is Marley Morris, the Associate Director at the Institute for Public Policy Research. And Marley, you've put out a report giving a different explanation for the riots in Southport. I wonder if you could explain why you think they happened.
Of course, I mean, I think there are lots of factors at play. What the report looks at in particular is the fact that our community infrastructure in this country has collapsed in many cases across the last couple of decades, and so we don't have that same infrastructure. We don't, the high streets changed dramatically. Local services have been depleted, and so I think part of a broader response to what we saw last year is about investing in that local infrastructure, in those local services, in communities, and that needs to be part of the government's response. Part of it, of course, needs to be tackling where there was disorder, where there was violence, and holding people to account for that. But I think also part of it is telling a wider story about, ensuring that we've got that social investment in the country.
But to what extent has community moved online and that the way people express themselves is in Facebook groups rather than in the village hall?
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. We've done research, across the country, and it's true. You hear stories about how people, for instance, looking at local Facebook groups for their information. And I mean, in some ways that's healthy and normal, and that's how society develops. There is a risk, I think, though, that you do get lots of misinformation online, and that can be damaging, I think, to local public trust. So I think there is a role for local areas to make sure that where there is confusion, particularly when it comes to serious crimes or antisocial behaviour, that good, reliable information is being put out into the public so that people can be reassured.
But isn't the sort of misinformation that goes on chat groups just the same as the misinformation of people sitting in the pub and saying this was done in such and such a way? Urban myths go round face-to-face just as much as they go round on the internet. Now, I was never too worried about people saying disagreeable things about me on the internet, because I assumed they would say them in the pub to each other anyway, because that's how people talk about politicians, and that this is just the continuation of the same.
I think, that's to some extent true. I think the difference is with social media, particularly on some websites, everyone can see it, and so it can spread much more quickly. And I think particularly when it comes to, for instance, people saying disagreeable things or saying unpleasant things, it means that people who are the victims can actually see that. So, for instance, there's this paradox that Sundar Kotwala, British futurist, talked about, that our society has become, on the one hand, less racist. In some ways, some people who are on online experience more racism because they're seeing lots of nasty comments about them being expressed on social media that they otherwise wouldn't have seen. So I think, yes, on one hand, you're right, it's similar to the kind of to talk down the pub, but there's also, I think, a risk that when you get misinformation, when you get vicious information being spread, that actually that can spread much more quickly, and that can cause some of the disorder that, for instance, we saw last year.
And how do you do anything about it? Because lots of people want to reinvigorate the high street. There was a discussion yesterday about pubs closing down. Isn't this just the way the world is going, and that you can't persuade people to live in the communities that they lived in the 1950s? It's just not realistic.
Well, I mean, I think there's lots of things I think you can do to reinvigorate communities, and I think part of it's about investment. It's about capital investment in transport and in infrastructure, which actually we've seen the government is starting to do more of. I think also a big part of it is about having a strategy for cohesion, so ensuring that you are supporting local areas through, supporting community centres, providing support to the kind of local charities. That I think actually can provide. That's the foundation often of communities, and if that's stripped away, then you often don't. You're left with individuals and not a proper community. So I think this is really important for the government to think about.
Right, but dare I say, this is all wonderfully sentimental, and this is going back to a glorious 18th century model of the rural little, where you've got the local pub and you've got the local church and you've got a strong community. But basically, since we urbanised, this has increasingly existed less and less. So this may be true in West Hertfordshire, where I live in Somerset, but it's never going to be true in Westminster.
I mean, it's always true. I think you're right that community cohesion works differently in different places. So often, we found in our research that in more rural areas, you find that actually you get quite a strong sense of community, and that's held together. And particularly, it's really valuable when you've got those community centres, when you've got that kind of social infrastructure in place. It's a bit different in big cities where people know each other less, and you've got more complex relationships. And obviously, that's healthy. But I think where communities do need this, and I think often in towns, in smaller cities, in rural areas, it's really important to make sure you've got that investment in place to provide the grounding for healthy community life.
Right. Marley, thank you very much for joining me. Well, in a moment, I'm going to be joined by the Deputy Leader of Reform, the one and only Richard Tice, to reveal the billions of pounds of savings that could be made by the Bank of England ostriches.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
27 now. Heaven, Health and Beauty in Shropshire is celebrating the official unveiling of their royal warrant today.
Well, it's been recognised as the supplier of skincare products and treatments to Her Majesty the Queen after she first used the company's products 19 years ago. She's a loyal customer.
She is a loyal customer. Jack Carson has been getting the treatment.
I was just like, I wish my mum was here to see this.
There's a beaming smile on the face of Heaven, Health and Beauty founder Deborah Mitchell as she celebrates the unveiling of their royal warrant. Starting her business with £10 in her pocket in 1995, Deborah says she's worked from the ground up and started providing skincare treatments to Her Majesty the Queen 19 years ago. Today she says she's honoured to be a recipient of a royal warrant.
It is a feeling that you cannot explain, but I was very lucky before having the royal warrant when Camilla Parker Bowles was Camilla Parker Bowles, and I didn't tell anybody I did her treatments. It hit in the press, and then this product, which is the bee venom made from bees, makes the skin look younger using a Botox alternative.
The King and Queen have granted royal warrants to almost 400 companies that supply the royal household, with each one lasting up to 5 years. It also means those companies can display the royal arms on their products. Director and daughter of Deborah, Ella Mitchell, makes this business a family affair. and she's made sure the packaging is already getting a fresh look. Ella says she's proud the products are made in Britain.
The achievement itself, you feel proud to be British, and I think that's one of the core values of us.
GB News, the People's Channel.
You've read the headlines, you've heard what those in power have to say. How about now we actually get to the truth?
They would pay attention.
We go beyond the political theatre and tell you what's really going on behind the scenes. For a massive council tax hike, one of the biggest in the UK. Others follow their lines, but we go off script.
You sound like a broken record, you say that week after week.
Cutting through the narratives and giving you unique perspectives. That's Ben Leo tonight, Saturdays and Sundays from 9 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and tonight we want to discuss the Bank of England, which can only mean one thing.
Oh, ostrich, consider how the world we know is trembling on the brink. Have you heard the news? May I hear your views? Will you tell me what you think? The ostrich lifted his head from the sand about an inch or so.
You will please excuse, but disturbing news I have no wish to know.
Well, yes, the Bank of England ostriches continue to stick their heads in the sand on all areas of monetary policy. However, it was my next guest who, along with our very own John Redwood, has suggested limiting the bank's gilt sales and other bond sales in order to save billions of pounds. And the idea is now picking up serious traction. Well, I'm joined now by the man himself, the Deputy Leader of Reform, Richard Tice. Richard, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, this seems to me to be the most obvious thing to do, that the Bank of England, like other central banks, bought, as quantitative easing, a huge amount of bonds, which are now at a discount to face value. If they hold them to maturity, they get face value. If they sell them now, they lose a ton of money, which the Treasury is underwriting, and this is billions of pounds a year.
And it's a voluntary decision that they don't have to do. They could hold these bonds to maturity. They could refinance them out for another 75 years. The last thing they should do is to sell them into an already crowded bond market, because the government is borrowing so much money, and triggering losses to the taxpayer of tens of billions of pounds. And I talked about it last year. I wrote to the Governor of the Bank of England a few weeks ago. He has written a 5-page letter back to me, accepting it's a matter for public debate, defending his position. That letter's on the Bank of England website. And what we know is, and I think it's accepted, it's increasing the cost of government borrowing because of all this extra debt they're selling back in the market by 0.2 to 0.5 of 1%. This is serious money that is costing the taxpayer.
So it's not only billions of pounds of losses, it's also extra, at least hundreds of millions of interest payments, because the cost of funding the government is going
because
up.
It's pushing the cost of debt up, and therefore the interest that the Treasury is having to pay is more, which means they have to borrow more. It's a catastrophe every which way. We're the only major central bank doing this.
Well, that's the thing. The Federal Reserve isn't doing it. The European Central Bank isn't doing it. Does the governor defend himself on the grounds that it's a tool of monetary policy, or is he doing it just because the bank...
He's trying to be a purist and to say, well, we need to try and regularise and sort of keep honest with the markets. Well, the reality is they've all been completely dishonest. They printed all of this money, they splurged it all over the place, and having done that, the last thing you do is double down on your mistake by trying to be a purist. And look, I spotted this, I raised it. 3 weeks ago, the Governor of the Bank of England is starting to backpedal on this. He said that maybe they need to slow down the rate of these sales back into the market, whether that's pressure from me, or he's concerned that actually the cost of government debt is rising, and that is actually sort of doubling down on the problem that Rachel Reeves, as Chancellor, has got.
And Rachel Reeves does not have to accept this, because it seems to me, and I've discussed this with John Redwood on the programme, this isn't part of the bank's independence. It's underwritten by the government. The Treasury had to approve it in the first place. It's not like setting interest rates that they have complete carte blanche over. It is an active decision that the Treasury must be complicit is. And if Rachel Reeves had any sense, she would simply ban it.
Well, they've got two issues. First of all, they didn't understand what I was talking about. And then when they did it and they realised that actually I'm on the right track on this, the last thing they can do is humiliate themselves by saying, Tice is right, let's do this. So they would rather cost the taxpayer billions of pounds more in losses than accept that actually I might be right on this.
And to be even-handed, the previous Tory administration didn't get this right either.
Correct.
It's something that could have been done several years ago.
And Jeremy Hunt should have told the bank not to do this. So, yeah, both main parties are guilty here of basically letting the governor and the Monetary Policy Committee get away without proper scrutiny, proper debate. There's been no debate about this in the House of Commons for hundreds of billions of pounds of taxpayer losses.
And to contextualise it, the winter fuel allowance was £1.4 billion, so it could have paid for that 20 times over or more.
Multiple times over, and all the other issues. And I'm still urging them to do it. I'm happy for them to do it and take the benefit of it, but let's stop wasting taxpayers' cash. And the beneficiary is rich city institutions.
Indeed, who are able to...
Because they receive the cheap. That's right, they buy the bonds cheaper, and as a result of that, they win and the taxpayer loses. And we're negotiating on behalf of the taxpayer.
Well, may I mention briefly the online safety bill, which I regrettably voted in favour of. The difficult issue was how do you defend children and defend freedom of speech, and looking back, I don't think we got the balance right. But your leader has been compared by Peter Kyle to being a supporter of Jimmy Savile. This is quite a statement, isn't it?
I think he must have woken up and got out of bed the wrong side this morning, Peter Kyle, because he completely lost the plot. And accusing Nigel Farage of being on the side of Jimmy Savile was absolutely appalling, conveniently forgetting the hypocrisy of a Labour Party, himself and Keir Starmer, who, when Boris Johnson mentioned it in the chamber, that Keir Starmer had been the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time that they decided not to prosecute Jimmy Savile, everyone went absolutely bonkers about it.
I remember this extremely well, because I got blamed for whispering this to Boris Johnson at the time. I'm not sure I did. I think it came from behind us, but nonetheless...
But the hypocrisy of this, and look, the reality is that already we're seeing this Online Safety Act. It's a disaster for free speech. The tech companies are taking down perfectly legitimate debates and videos, and it's not protecting children one iota. Do you know the biggest downloads of apps at the moment is these virtual private networks?
Yes.
So the way to protect children is a combination of tech, with the changes to phones and things.
I was inspired by this to have a look on ChatGPT to see which VPN for free they recommended.
For free? I know
that. You're very frugal, Jacob. Yeah, I am. And they recommended Proton, and they said that's what you should do. And it's incredibly easy to do, and then the government can't spy on you.
And then you get horrific stuff on the dark web, which is completely, just utterly horrific and appalling. And essentially, this online safety would be actually worse for children. That's why it doesn't protect children at all.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. And we'll be talking about that a bit more later on with my pugnacious panel covering the extraordinary attack on Nigel, claiming he's on the side of Jimmy Savile, which he obviously isn't. Nigel will fix it in a different way.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
A change across southern and eastern parts of Europe. Heavy rain easing from the west and heatwave conditions easing in the east. Nevertheless, it is still set to be hot on Wednesday, particularly across parts of Greece, and any persistent outbreaks of rain that we've had earlier in the week tending to turn more showery in nature. But a very different story across Spain, Portugal and across the Canary Islands. Plenty of sunshine to go around and feeling hot in that sunshine too. And that theme is set to continue for the end of the week and as we head into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now we are going to see some further showers as we go through the rest of today, tonight and into tomorrow, but there will also be a lot of dry weather around. We still have high pressure staying to the southwest of us, and it's this that's partly leading to the largely fine weather, but also we're kind of in between frontal systems moving through. So although there are still some showery bursts across central southern parts of England in particular as we go through tonight, many places will have some dry weather and some clear skies too. Where we see those clear skies, particularly towards the west but also the east, we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. It is going to be a relatively warm night for most of us. Then taking a closer look at first thing tomorrow morning, and quite cloudy across many parts of Scotland, a few showery bursts, nothing particularly heavy, and there will be some brighter breaks, particularly towards the Western Isles and maybe some parts towards eastern Scotland too. Across Northern Ireland, it's looking bright to start, but there is some clouds, some rain waiting to push in from the west. And then across much of England and Wales, a pretty mixed picture. Some showery bursts here and there, but also some brighter sunny weather, particularly towards the southwest, and also parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire should have some decent sunshine first thing. Then as we go through the day, further showery spells of rain, particularly across eastern parts. Here they could turn a little bit heavy across parts of eastern England in particular. A slice of sunshine for some western areas, and in that sunshine feeling pretty warm with temperatures peaking in the low to mid 20s for quite a few of us, but some cloudier, wetter weather coming in from the west later on. Then looking ahead to Thursday, and a swathe of fairly hefty showery rain looks set to push its way eastwards across southern parts, and this could bring some thunder, could bring some heavy downpours, perhaps could cause some problems. A few showers likely further north. A few showers still possible on Friday, but by the weekend, by Saturday, it's looking drier for many of us. See you later.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
While I was in government, I tried relatively ineffectually to water down the online safety bill. There was and there is a tension between protecting children and freedom of speech. So ultimately, I voted for it. Unfortunately, it's now clear that the Act goes too far and has unintended consequences, so needs ultimately to be repealed and the protections rethought. Nigel Farage's reform has suggested precisely this, which has led to Labour Minister Peter Kyle claiming he's on the side of Jimmy Savile. Well, my most pugnacious panel is with me, the son, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the journalist and author Michael Crick. Peter Kyle's gone too far, hasn't he? He's got to apologise for comparing Nigel to Jimmy Savile, saying he's on the side of Jimmy Savile.
Well, I'm a great admirer of Peter Kyle. I think he's one of the few ministers in this government who's been doing well, and I hope that eventually he gets promoted. But I think on this occasion, he's gone a bit too far. But it's the sort of thing that you say in debate. You do occasionally from time to time. Although apparently he's repeated this phrase in lots of interviews today, so some thought has gone into it. It's not just off the cuff. But, I mean, there was talk earlier in the day of Farage actually suing. But I think that would be a very foolish thing to do. Yeah, I mean, apologise? Yeah, I think actually apologies don't do politicians any harm. I think, yeah, maybe apologise, but it's not the end of the world. And it's clear what he meant. You know, he was basically saying that is the sort of things that Farage is arguing would be of help to paedophiles.
But isn't this typical of the left, that when it was pointed out...
I think it goes on the right as well.
But when it was pointed out that Keir Starmer hadn't prosecuted Jimmy Savile as DPP, everyone said this was outrageous slur, completely monstrous. Somebody even resigned from Downing Street over it. There was a great hissy fit amongst lefties. Now, when they do it, it's fine. I don't mind too much. Just back and forth politics. You can have it one way or the other. You can't have it both ways, and Labour's trying to have it both ways.
What I do think is interesting about this is that it proves, not that it needed proving particularly, that the only people that the government are worried about is reform. They would never have made that crack about I don't know, somebody, I don't even know who the opposite number is in the Conservative Party, or even actually currently the leader. So that I would take as a badge of honour if I were Nigel about all this. And they're not going to change, and they're going to become more and more vile towards the Reform leadership. And so this will be proper politics now, going forward, and something which I think Nigel has to go on with. I'm surprised that Nigel asked for an apology. Honestly, in politics, is that a good idea? Well, have you ever? I mean, you have taken the most tremendous bucket loads, actually, from your own side as well as opposite. Well,
I've never asked for an apology.
You've never asked for an apology.
Well, it's a way of keeping it going, and Farage clearly thinks that he's onto a, it helps him.
I think that's right. I think this is so far. I think the Jimmy Savile comparison makes Peter look.
But you saw what Jimmy Savile was, what the lawyer who acted for the victims of Jimmy Savile said. I don't want to see my clients being politically weaponised in this disgusting manner. And actually, I do understand that actually more than I understand Nigel getting irritated.
I think there's also a wider issue here, as whether it's sensible for Labour to attack Farage personally or all the time, and whether that really, makes him the big story and boosts him.
I think Calvin's right, that it shows Labour's frightened of Nigel, and this boosts him. It has him on the front pages again. It's another day when the story's about Nigel. It overwhelms the other stories in the press. This boosts reform.
Yeah, and demanding an apology, it all adds to that, yeah.
But the Online Safety Act seems to me is just a reminder that politics is actually quite difficult, that there are two strong competing tensions, that freedom of speech is fundamental. It's so important how we're governed. But you really don't want children going on sites that are pornographic, lead to self-harm, lead to eating disorders. And therefore, there's a great pressure to do something. But the something that has been done seems to have gone too far, and Twitter was taking...
Can I ask you this? Right, I don't know the detail in the way you know it. What is it about this act which is going to deny a normal person or even an abnormal person free speech?
It's the use of the word harm, and therefore some sites have started taking down things that may be revealing the origin of rioters, because that may be harmful, it may be shocking to children to read it. And I think Twitter's done this, so that if you want to look something up, you'll have to prove that you're 18 to read something about a riot that's taken place in some part of the country.
Or 16.
I mean, there's often an element of people in authority overreacting to a piece of legislation. Oh, we better not say that, better keep that out because we might be in breach of this law, when in fact they're probably not. But, I mean, it does seem that some media outlets are not running, for instance, details of law cases, criminal cases involving paedophiles, simply because they think that might be covered by the Act. Whether it is or not, I find it hard to believe that that's covered by the Act. That surely is covered by court privilege.
Even here, things that may touch on the sub judice rules, I'm very cautious about introducing, because I don't know what my guest will say.
Yeah.
And if one of you fires off and says something, so self-censorship of media outlets is a very real thing, and therefore once you pass the law, free speech gets undermined, not necessarily because of the law, but because of people's response.
Right, so, I mean, Twitter is just a pie-throwing exercise. I mean, you can get away with anything. I noticed...
You can't. People have gone to prison for tweeting things that have been sub judice.
That is true, but they must have known that they were drifting into that area when they decided to say it. And I think those people that do go into that area know they're going into that area. This is not an accident. They're doing it as a form of brigadio, and they're saying, right, I can publish anything I like. This is free speech. The truth about the matter is we don't have free speech. America's different. America
has the First Amendment.
Because it's a First Amendment issue. But over here, we haven't got free speech. And if people who are watching today think that they can simply go out there and say what they like on social media, you are going to get yourself into a lot of trouble.
All right, well, thank you to my very pugnacious panel. Not the most pugnacious this evening, I don't think. Anyway, in other news, my next guest has issued an absolutely brilliant explainer illustrating the sheer scale of mass migration over the past few years, specifically focusing on the issue of indefinite leave to remain.
Imagine this bead represents 1,000 people, a sold-out West End theatre. For the 24 years up to 1997, net migration was 18,000 people. Now let's look just at those who've arrived since 2021. 700,000 humanitarian visas, 280,000 and 300,000 family visas. Most of these people didn't come to work and are paying no tax. But after 5 years here, most of these people can get something called indefinite leave to remain. ILR means stay indefinitely, get welfare, social housing, free healthcare, and it puts you on the path to citizenship. This is insane. State support should only be for citizens. We just can't afford for people to come here who can't support themselves.
Well, I'm now joined by the Conservative MP, Katie Lamb. Katie, first of all, thank you very much for joining me. Did you count out all those beads to make sure that you had exactly the right numbers?
I did. So each bead, as you heard me say just there, is 1,000 people. And yes, I counted out every single one.
And the thing I was most struck by was the picture that we showed briefly of the layer of people who pay tax, that overwhelmingly the people who come here will be net recipients, not net payers into the system, and therefore they fall on ordinary taxpayers.
Yes, and I think most people would think that that's completely crazy. You know, most people are generous, open, thoughtful. They want to do their very best by their fellow man. But there is no way that this country can become the welfare system of the world.
And what can we change of it under our current laws and international agreements? And what of it would require us to change things like the ECHR? Because obviously we have our own immigration laws that were changed by the last Conservative government and are cutting legal migration. How much of it is in that category, and how much of it do you think the human rights aspect comes in?
Well, for that video specifically, for the numbers that we're talking about here, that's all legal migration. So all of that is rules that are within our power to change already in our current legal framework. In terms of illegal migration to secure the border, I think that there are further changes that we have to make to the framework that we operate within. But there were various amendments to the Borders Bill that Labour have just passed that I and my shadow Home Office colleagues laid that essentially would have fixed this problem, raising the salary threshold, raising the qualification period for indefinite leave to remain, saying nobody who's committed a crime can get indefinite leave to remain. Changing these rules is actually quite straightforward.
And so what's the argument against doing it? Why hasn't this been done? Why has the Labour Party not wanted to implement your amendments?
The truthful answer is I don't really know, because if you accept, and it sounds like really everybody accepts, that the level of migration that we've seen in recent years was a mistake, should never have happened, it seems to me the only logical thing to do is to take the steps that you can take to fix that problem. And I don't understand why the government don't want to do that.
Which is what the last Conservative government belatedly began to do, having to some extent created the problem. But the OBR came up with a report, which I thought was pretty specious last year, saying that migrants were a net contributor to the system. Is this the OBR just being useless, or they use different figures from you?
Well, firstly, that's not quite what the OBR said. So what the OBR said was that for people who come here on a skilled worker visa, there is a slight economic benefit over the period of time that they were looking at. As you say, that's actually quite heavily disputed. Lots of people disagree with that, and it doesn't take into account things like their dependents. But the vast majority of people don't come here to work. So even if that were true, and I'm not sure it is true, the vast majority of people who come here don't even fall into that category.
Well, I thought the failure of their report was they said they couldn't calculate dependents because it was too complicated, and therefore you only included the people who earned, and it was bound to be a nonsense figure. But then I think the OBR is a useless organisation that doesn't know how many beans make five to look at your counting of beans.
I'm afraid so. Pretty much all of their conclusions basically just seem to be we need to ratchet immigration even further, which anybody who can see has clearly not led to us being a high-growth economy.
And they have been terribly influential in creating government policy because they've scored immigration as being a net economic advantage. And this led both to the last Conservative government and to this government, desperate for economic growth, encouraging migration.
And then you also end up with this ratchet effect, because if immigration has been even higher than people thought it would be, and certainly higher than it was promised to be, the OBR then says, oh, well, if it drops from this level, then that's like the economy contracting, even though there's no evidence to show that this is actually true.
Your evidence has comprehensively shown that what they've been saying is false.
There is no way that there is the kind of correlation that they talk about between bringing people to this country and economic growth, and particularly when the vast majority of people who come here don't come to work. It's a nonsense.
Well, I think everyone should look at your video in full on Twitter, and thank you very much, Katie, for providing it. In a moment, I will be breaking my silence. You've all been waiting for this with bated breath, and my pugnacious panel will discuss it, the Sydney Sweeney white supremacy advert saga.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace
Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Adverts have been in terminal decline in this country ever since this one in the 1930s.
Have you proved the goodness in a Guinness? There's only one way to do it. Try a Guinness a day for a while and enjoy proving that Guinness is good for you.
Now, isn't that marvellous? We're not allowed to say those sorts of things anymore, and they speak so properly in those old films. Anyway, we reached a new low in 2024 with this Jaguar advert. I think the agency that came up with that nonsense got given the old heave-ho, but if I'm wrong, my apologies to them for their marvellous and inspired artistic work. But for once, some humour has been restored to advertising.
Sydney Sweeney, Hasbro Keynes.
However, this advert has been accused of white supremacy. Well, I'm joined now by my panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the author and journalist Michael Crick. Kelvin, isn't it great that we're having adverts that are fun and entertaining and may actually sell something after a couple of decades of pretty dire stuff?
Yes, I mean, the issue, I presume, here is the expression great genes, which is a pun, and has now been picked up by the left, who've got nothing else to do all day long, but now accuse everybody of eugenics. It is ludicrous. I am astonished that this ad got away, by the way, because I could think the way that it has to go through the client, the ad agency itself, various other people who are called in, you know, research groups. What do you think of that? Because for a woman to stroke her backside under any circumstances, I find it absolutely amazing. It's a great thing to see.
Shocked? You didn't need a trigger warning for it.
I managed to get over the problem of watching it, but intellectually, I was amazed that they could do that. I don't believe that that ad could be made in the UK. And nor do I believe that any agency would actually put it forward.
Because we've got the most boring bureaucracy, the Advertising Standards Agency, that stops any advert that's any fun at all. What do you think they'll have to say about that if they get to... Because I assume they look at it after it's come out.
Well, I don't suppose they'll approve, but, I mean, we're all falling for, you know, the publicity stunt here, aren't we?
Brilliantly.
I mean, you know, be controversial, and then, of course, what they'll do, if they've got any sense, a few weeks down the road, they'll get a black male gay actor to wear the same jeans or the male version of the same jeans, and they'll say, no, it's not. We're not sexist. We're not supremacist and all of that. But the more that we talk about it, we're giving them publicity.
Right, but if they'd done it the other way around, if they started off with a black guy stroking his backside, right, that would have been fine. Then you could have had the one. I don't believe that will happen either. And actually, the other person I'm surprised about, I'd love to know how much she was paid to do that. That White Lotus lady is an enormously famous lady, right? I am astonished. Yeah, exactly.
You're not familiar with her?
No. I don't believe we've been formally introduced.
No, you won't find her. You won't find yours, though. No, but seriously, she would have got paid, I suspect, £1 million or £2 million for doing that, right? And for £2 million, I know you're attracted to the bright lights yourself. You might put on a pair of those jeans.
I think for a couple £1 million, I'd put on a pair of jeans. Even I would. I'd even present GB News
I think
wearing...
it's quite likely somebody will take you up on that offer. The picture of you wearing jeans...
Yeah, and
people would pay for that.
What about stroking
your button?
I don't think anyone would pay for that.
Well, not for them to stroke your button. No. You stroking your button.
You can say. I'm not sure. We'll have to consult the catechism, see where that's like. Anyway, I want to go back to the advertising thing, because there was a heyday of advertising. Heineken refreshes the parts other beers cannot reach. All of those that we remember that made people... The Hamlet adverts, they were absolutely brilliant.
But they seem to be ads that were made for other people in the industry. And I think they did surveys that show that they didn't necessarily sell the goods. But, of course, we've become... much more boring. I mean, like, remember yesterday, Tom Lehrer died, the satirist, singer and songwriter. And he, in his songs, which the left loved in the 50s and 60s, did all sorts of things, like, you know, make jokes about incest and bestiality and murder and all sorts of things that would never be allowed today. So it's not just in the advertising world. It's in society as a whole.
But do you think this is a change of trend, or this will be a one-off and it's going to bounce back to the Jaguar rubbish?
Yeah. No, well, the Jaguar, they're going back, actually, I know, to a old-fashioned idea, showing a car. But I think the issue is that they feel constrained, the ad industry, because they are trying to reach 100% of the market. And when you try and reach 100% of the market, you are done for. Instead of saying, I tell you what, I'll be very grateful if 3% of the 12% who are likely to buy it do go and buy it, they say, we've got to look at this 100%. We can't upset anybody. And on that basis, because we feel that we could destroy our brand with one bad campaign. That's what they worry about.
Well, I think it'll swing back. It's a bit like in the 18th century, had all these cartoons showing the king sitting on the lavatory and all of, and doing all sorts of terrible stuff that you wouldn't get away with today. But that all swung back the other way in the Victorian era, and now it's swung back our way, and now again. So all right, it trends.
Well, here's my Jaguar advert. That's a proper Jaguar key ring. It's been in my pocket for years. Anyway, thank you very much to my pugnacious panel. Up next, the one and only Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what are you advertising this evening, other than the glories of Somerset?
Just a great show, actually, Jacob. We've got loads on tonight. There has been a murder in the camp that I was in northern France. I'm going to be talking about that. I'm going to be speaking to some brave military veterans who are being booted out of their accommodation at short notice. But to make way for who, I wonder? Peter Kyle's gone absolutely feral, saying that Nigel Farage is basically on the side of Jimmy Savile. So I'm going to be tearing him apart on that. Rather nice of Peter Kyle to open the Jimmy Savile door for us all, I think. So there we go. We're talking about that and President Trump's net zero warning to Sir Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband. All of that and much, much more after your weather in Somerset.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now we are going to see some further showers as we go through the rest of today, tonight and into tomorrow, but there will also be a lot of dry weather around. We still have high pressure staying to the southwest of us, and it's this that's partly leading to the largely fine weather, but also we're kind of in between frontal systems moving through. So although there are still some showery bursts across central southern parts of England in particular as we go through tonight, many places will have some dry weather and some clear skies too. Where we see those clear skies, particularly towards the west but also the east, we could see a few pockets of mist and fog developing, but temperatures not dropping a huge amount. It is going to be a relatively warm night for most of us. Then taking a closer look at first thing tomorrow morning, and quite cloudy across many parts of Scotland, a few showery bursts, nothing particularly heavy, and there will be some brighter breaks, particularly towards the Western Isles and maybe some parts towards eastern Scotland too. Across Northern Ireland, it's looking bright to start, but there is some clouds, some rain waiting to push in from the west. And then across much of England and Wales, a pretty mixed picture. Some showery bursts here and there, but also some brighter sunny weather, particularly towards the southwest, and also parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire should have some decent sunshine first thing. Then as we go through the day, further showery spells of rain, particularly across eastern parts. Here they could turn a little bit heavier across parts of eastern England in particular. A slice of sunshine for some western areas, and in that sunshine feeling pretty warm with temperatures peaking in the low to mid 20s for quite a few of us, but some cloudier, wetter weather coming in from the west later on. Then looking ahead to Thursday, and a swathe of fairly hefty showery rain looks set to push its way eastwards across southern parts, and this could bring some thunder, could bring some heavy downpours, perhaps could cause some problems. A few showers likely further north. A few showers still possible on Friday, but by the weekend, by Saturday, it's looking drier for many of us. See you later.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can win big, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? The holiday of a lifetime? Or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? Lines close on the 1st of August, so make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning.